Mary, do we have a quorum?
I think so.
I'm not going to stay there. I'm going to take a walk. Okay. Quorum call. I'm better than Ralph at this. I'm better than Ralph at this. Call this meeting of the Davenport School Board to order. As you know, our meeting is on YouTube. Those links have been available to the public. We do have an open forum today. For those wishing to communicate on open forum, please follow the steps below to participate in open forum remotely. Call this number, 1-563-445-5001. And
Martin Schultz
is now joining.
Conference ID 8352794. Identify yourself by stating your name and address. I, as president, will acknowledge you and allow you 2 minutes to speak. Please keep in mind that board members do not respond to comments made at open forum. Is there anybody wishing to speak at open forum? Anyone for open forum?
Dan Gosa is now joining.
No one apparently wishes to participate in open forum. We'll move to the consent agenda. The administration has pulled a recommendation for the Director of Operations, so that's not included in the consent agenda. May I have a motion on the
Debbie
consent
Potts
agenda?
is now
Mr.
joining.
President.
Who?
Mr. President,
Who's that?
Hayes.
Linda,
Linda Hayes.
Oh, Director Hayes?
Debbie Potts,
Is now exiting.
I move that the board accept the consent agenda as written.
Is there a second? I need a second. Was that Director Postian?
Yes.
All right. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda?
Bruce, I do have a question under 3.05, that contract. It says that it will be up to 40 participants in July. I'd like to know how those 40 have been chosen. That's my first question. Are there expectations that other special ed teachers will have to learn this material? And how will they get that training? And is this voluntary, the July learning meeting, whatever you want to call it?
Ms. Downs, would you be available to answer the question, please?
I sure am.
Thank you.
We worked with principals and the building facilitators to choose one person from each building. Although I think it's secondary, we might have chosen more than one. But we wanted at least one person trained at each building in order to implement this. It's not a curriculum, but this model with students who have severe reading disabilities and severe writing disabilities. And the principal and the facilitator worked with talking to the staff about it. We would not expect anybody else to implement except for those that have been trained. And we changed our approach this year to limit the number so that we can provide actually on-site support and coaching to each one of those teachers throughout the year to help them implement all of the elements of the program. So we last year did this for what was called the foundational Fort and Gillingham, which really is for readers at the K2 level. So this is the advanced, which is for readers that are third grade and above. Where we really need the support is honestly our secondary schools to give them some more strategies to work with students that would be the best fit. Did I get all of what you asked for, Karen?
Yes, I believe you did. So it's only these 40, and those would be the ones that would be implementing it.
Yes, and the reason why we have to say up to 40 in the contract is because the payment we make is based on the number of participants, and so we anticipate that it'll be 40 or within a couple of that, so that we covered the number of participants. It may not be that many, but we wanted to make sure that we paid, that the company knew what to expect.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on that contract? Okay.
Any other questions? Any other questions on the consent agenda? Then we'll move to the vote. Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Postian,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Beck, Director Beck, Director Klein-Jerome,
Yes.
Director Mayfield,
Yes.
and my vote is yes, the motion carries. May I have a motion concerning the approval of bills? Someone needs to move the motion. Is that Director Hayes?
Mr. President,
Director
the following
Hayes?
resolution, yes, the following resolution is recommended by administration for adoption of the bills from the bill listing periods of April 23rd, 2020, to May 6th.
Hi, you've reached Allison Beck. I can't come to
Unknown
the phone right
participant
now,
is
so
now
please leave your
joining.
name and number.
And 5/7/20 to 5/20/20. Resolved, all claims presented to the board having been duly certified as correct by the secretary, reviewed by
Unknown
the
participant
administrative
is now
board members,
exiting.
and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn on the treasury for the several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the periods of 4/23/20 to 5/6/20 and 5/7/20 to 5/20/20.
Is there a second?
Second.
Director Klein-Jerome seconds. Is there any discussion? We'll move to the vote. Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome,
Yes.
Director Mayfield,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Postian,
Yes.
Director Beck, Director Beck's not responding, and my vote is yes, the motion carries. Now move to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, everyone, and welcome not only to our participants this evening, but all of those who are watching via YouTube. Welcome to our meeting. Clearly, the meat of our meeting is coming a little bit later on, where we are going to talk about the last 8 weeks of the school year, of this particular school year. The board has had an interest in hearing from individuals beyond administrators on how that has played out, so we have that set up. And also, we are planning an extensive conversation with the board and with the public with regard to the development of our return to learn plan. So I will not speak to that now, but certainly know that that's coming a little bit later in the meeting. I would like to begin by congratulating all of our 2020 graduates from all of our high schools. It's been certainly an interesting year for all of our graduates, and I had the privilege of videoing a graduation message to all of our graduates that will be shown along with our graduation ceremonies on KWQC TV on June 6th. So we're very excited to have each of our high schools has a 1-hour slot for graduation. Every graduate will be acknowledged. All of the graduation speeches have been cut and taped. Mr. President, I understand you gave an opening for every single one, so thank you for doing that. And while it certainly doesn't take the place of a face-to-face graduation and students walking across the stage, we certainly hope that people will tune in and watch and acknowledge and celebrate the many successes of our graduating class, and we couldn't be more proud. So again, we'll get more information out, but June 6th, KWQC, our graduation will be a digital graduation, and we'll try and make it as meaningful as we possibly can, knowing that the graduates and their families will be in their living rooms and family rooms watching this on TV, but they will actually see themselves on TV, which hopefully will be a treat for all of our graduates on that. So we're looking forward to that piece. Coming off of an announcement from the governor, we are taking a look at our phased reopening of the district, specifically with the ASC starting on June 1st. We have a ASC phased opening team meeting taking place tomorrow. The idea is to get the administrative support center up and running again. We will do that in a phased way. We have a number of folks, as well as representation from our county health offices, to help us with that phased opening, and we are treating it as sort of a precursor for opening our schools in terms of the things that we need to do to make sure that people are safe coming back to work into the building. The protocols will be put in place over the course of the next few days. We have a framework in mind that has been put forward by the Department of Health, and we will be fine-tuning that and making that announcement to our employees that are working in the ASC, knowing that a very similar framework will take place for the individual schools and buildings as we move forward. So hopefully looking forward to some sense of normalcy and work. It's entirely possible that we can certainly leave it up to the Board of Education if you would like to have in-person board meetings again. Certainly we have the go-ahead from the governor to do that. But we can certainly put protocols in place if the board is inclined to go back to that format. But again, that'll be a board discussion. Another item that I think is very important with regard to normalcy is the resumption of athletics. Pleased to report that our varsity and baseball season will be getting started. It will be getting started on June 15th. All we are waiting for now are the safety and health protocols to be put forward, not only by the conference individuals that are planning this, but obviously the health officials. As you can imagine, there are many questions that we still need answers to as a system, not only from a school perspective, but from a conference perspective, to include sanitization processes for our equipment and for our teams, social distancing that's appropriate, because right now the plan is to have spectators, and we need to make sure that we have a plan in place for managing that. Again, it'll be a 5-week season, and then we're told by the state that the state tournament will begin after the 5-week season has been completed. As a school district, we're in the process of continuing to planning our summer school protocols, looking to begin our summer school a little bit later than usual, given the pandemic. We're obviously planning on a whole host of pieces. We wanted to make sure that we would have the opportunity to actually conduct a summer school. And right now we have a tentative date of July 15th for the start of our what would be a 5-week summer school period. So that process is still planning. More information will be put forward on that. We are knee-deep in a hiring cycle as a school district for multiple positions. I can report to the school board that this is going to be a very interesting hiring season, only because we're starting to see system-wide as well as area-wide, statewide, and from a national perspective, we're starting to see educators who have been under a lot of stress and are retiring early. I'm just going to be honest with you. And some that had perhaps hoped to continue their career a little bit longer are deciding that this new environment, for personal reasons, not professional reasons, because they're eminently competent people, but for personal reasons, in speaking to my superintendent colleagues, not only from around the state, but from around the country, we're hearing about a number of retirements, and those are still coming in, and people are making last-minute personal decisions. So it's going to make for a very interesting hiring cycle moving forward, but please know that we're well into that process. The board may recall at our last board meeting, in terms of the next agenda item, that we had brought forward an idea to partner with MediaCom for accessibility issues that we certainly have been experiencing from an equity perspective to our student body being able to connect to our online learning platform. We did hear information that the Department of Education is working on accessibility issues, and we're anxious to hear what they have to say. However, they have suggested to schools, and that came across today in the Department of Education's webinar, that we as a district should plan on managing that ourselves at the very beginning of the process, and not just assume that the state is going to take that on. But we hope that they will be a partner in some way, shape, or form in terms of helping with access and equity issues that we have moving forward. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, our Return to Learn plan, the framework has been outlined by the state. We have already begun as a school system to work on our Return to Learn plan, which is due on July 1st for the district, and we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about that this evening. The Department of Education is releasing information in chunks. We received a little bit of that this past Friday. We received more this afternoon. There's a lot to do in a very short period of time, and again, like most of the pieces that have come forward, there are still more questions than there are answers. But I think the board will be pleased with the structure that we put in place as a district so that we can move forward with our Return to Learn plan. At this moment in time, I don't see anything on the horizon that would alter our start date for school, which is set for August 24th. That date is still there. It's possible that the legislature may do something different, but I'm not going to anticipate that. So our minds and thinking is focused on starting school on the 24th of August moving forward. And lastly, this is the last official Board of Education meeting for this, what would be a normal school year, but certainly was not normal in any sense of the word. When I reflect back on the time that I've been here this year and the work that's been done, I would just like to, first of all, thank everyone for their patience. A lot had to be accomplished in a very short period of time, especially over the course of these last 8 weeks. We had quite a bit of work to do when it came to our financials, obviously a great deal of work to do when it came to do our Phase 2 citations. It's been a very busy year, and I just wanted to say thank you for everyone in this district who rolled up their sleeves and helped us with these processes. Obviously, it was our employees. All of our staff members rolled up their sleeves and pitched in. I'd like to say thank you to the state officials who have been a partner throughout this entire process moving forward. Our community and our parents have also been very helpful in terms of providing feedback all along the way in multiple contexts when we've asked them for help. And the Board of Education also has been very diligent in asking very good questions and guidance and providing leadership during what has been a rather tumultuous year and a rather busy year for all of us. So I would just like to thank everyone for their contribution. I do believe the district is in a much better place today than it was a year ago in terms of being organized and having the work ahead of us. Certainly there are challenges ahead, and I'm not just talking about the pandemic and the pieces that we have to put in place to mitigate the learning loss from this year, but certainly we have to keep a solid look to our budget moving forward and what that's going to look like. But again, remembering our mission, which is to provide for the academic, social, and emotional development of all of our students, and that is always the eye of the prize that we have moving forward. So again, thank you to everyone for their support for what has been a very, very busy year. Mr. President, that concludes my superintendent's report.
What about financials?
So moving next, we have, I've asked Claudia Wood, our CFO, to give the board an update in terms of status, where we are at the end of April heading into the school year. So I'm going to turn things over to our CFO.
Allison Beck
is now joining.
A financial update.
Good evening. You received a number of reports, and we are now all caught up. We got a little bit behind with the pandemic, and other things took priority. You received the standard Secretary's Monthly Financial Report. There are 3 of those for February, March, and April, which is the showing all our bank balances, and by each fund, and that's a report that is required by the state. So you've got those in front of you. And then you also have the financial statements that are coming from our new Forecast 5 software. And we'll just talk about the April. I'd be happy to go back if you have any questions on February or March, but since April is the most recent, I wanted to look at that. The first couple of pages are the statement of revenues, expenditures.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Statement of revenues, expenditures, and surplus or deficit. This report at the top is for the general fund, and you will see it does give you 4 prior years, so you can do some comparison to prior fiscal years, and then it shows the current year. And it breaks down the revenues between local, and the majority of that would be our property taxes that we receive, as well as building rental fees, student service fees, that type of thing. And then it breaks down the amount of state funding, federal funding, and other. And
Available at this time.
Unknown participant is now joining.
And the next section breaks down the expenditures by several of the main categories: salaries and benefits, purchase services, supplies, and property and other.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
The main item in the other objects is the AEA flow-through money. So again, the first several columns are about the general fund. And then on the right side of that page, there is the same information, but for the current year only, for our student activity fund, our management fund, and then the sales tax fund is the SAVE fund, is how we term that. And then on the next page, it continues on to other funds. We have our PEPL fund and our debt service fund, and then the nutrition fund. And we're keeping an eye on that as we finish out the year. Obviously, it was impacted by school being closed down. And then the other fund 60, that is our out of school time fund. That is our other enterprise fund besides the nutrition fund. And again, it was also impacted by school being closed down and those programs not being able to take place. So we'll be monitoring that. Both of those funds, the nutrition fund and the other fund 60, are enterprise funds, and the expectation and the accounting regulations on those funds are that they are self-supporting. And then we have an internal service fund. That's our self-insurance fund. And we don't have any trust funds. So that's those 2 pages of the report gives you a breakdown of all the different funds. And then the other 2 pages of the report, at the top, it just says Davenport Revised Certified Budget Monthly Reporting. This goes into some projections based on what we had budgeted and projecting our revenues and our expenditures for the remainder of the year. Really focusing on our unspent authorized budget. That's the item that we have been scrutinized on and we've been looking at very closely, and that we will be finalizing our reporting on that to the state in September, and we'll need to report back to the School Budget Review Committee on that. So these 2 pages of the report that are labeled the revised certified budget, those are about the general fund only. And again, there's some prior year comparisons. At the end of April, the budget that is shown on here is our original budget. Next month, when we look at these reports, it will reflect our amended budget that the board took action on. And right now, the projection on the unspent authorized budget is still negative, but we are looking at taking another, our last and final insurance holiday yet this year, and we have some grant revenue that will be accrued at the end of the year. Right now, a lot of the grant revenue for a lot of our title programs is reported on a cash basis. But at the end of the year, we will be accruing for revenue that we've earned that we haven't actually received. So that will also change the picture of where we will end up when we finally report on our certified annual report that's due in the middle of September. So there's a lot of information there. I've given you a quick rundown of it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So Claudia, do you think with the grant money coming in, if we take that insurance holiday, we are going to get our budget back to where our certified budget is? It's a huge concern that we are in a deficit.
Yes, we think we are on the right track with the reductions we've made. And once all the miscellaneous revenue is accrued at the end of the year, we should be on track for being at a zero or a positive unspent authorized budget balance.
And is that only if we take that insurance holiday?
I believe so.
Thank you.
Hi, Claudia. This is Allison. A couple questions. How does CARES Act money factor into all of this?
We have actually received the money. It came in May, and it should work. We're still waiting on a lot of guidance on it, but it should work like other federal funding that we receive, meaning the amount of it that we will actually have spent by June 30th, that's the amount of that we'll be able to count as revenue. So in essence, it breaks even. And any amount that we have not spent as of June 30th gets deferred into next year. But what we're going to be working on here over the next few weeks as part of our Return to Learn plan is to put together a thoughtful approach to how we need and want to use that money for being able to be ready to bring kids back to the buildings, have teachers be ready to do either in-person or remote or a hybrid method of instruction. And we'll also have to be looking at expenses that we incurred this year that were due to the pandemic. We've had additional expenses in our food service fund, and the guidance that we've been getting from the state has told us that the CARES Act money can be used in our enterprise funds, which is why I was pointing those out on our financial statements. Food service incurred some expenses that they normally wouldn't have had, as well as not having all the revenue that they normally would have had. So we'll be looking at that. And in the general fund, we bought all those hotspots so that we could get kids connected. We've been, making other technology-related purchases. We've purchased masks and gloves and additional sanitizers and cleaning products. We'll be trying to identify, and we've been coding those types of expenses separately, even before we knew we were going to get the money, just because I knew we were probably going to be able to get some kind of funding or have to report on that. So we'll be able to offset some of those unusual expenses that we had this year. So again, we should be kind of breaking even there. And when we're looking at our unspent authorized budget, that will be additional miscellaneous revenue that we'll be able to record that we didn't know about, 2.5 months ago. So we should have the funding to offset some of those unusual expenditures that occurred this year.
Okay, thank you. My other question is, can it be used to pay our teachers salaries for the couple months that they've been teaching remotely, and then save that money in the general fund?
No, that
Okay.
it can't, because those are expenses we would have been paying anyway, and we still have been receiving our state aid and our Title I money and property taxes. So the CARES Act money needs to be for, I guess for lack of a better term, expenses that would be above and beyond, quote, the normal school year. And being able to offset those unusual expenses that I was talking about, and then also helping us prepare to being ready to bring students and teachers back to the schools.
Okay, and then my last question is, and this may not be even in the picture anymore, but we had talked possibly about starting the school year a little bit earlier or having longer school days. But of course, that requires us to pay the teachers and the staff for that extra time. Would we be able to use it in that context to pay
Unknown
staff?
participant is now joining.
We could, and that's something I think we'll be looking at, but to be able to bring back all staff for, let's say, an additional week, we didn't receive enough money to be able to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Claudia, just a follow-up to Allison's questions. On the CARES Act money, what about anything custodial-wise as far as cleaning, disinfecting in the buildings? Can that be covered under the CARES Act?
Yes, and those are some of the expenses we've already been identifying. They had to purchase, additional and some different types of cleaning supplies and products to address the virus and making sure we were meeting, all the health guidelines for sanitizing. They've done more cleaning and different types of cleaning than we normally would do. So yes, all those types of expenditures would qualify to use the CARES Act money.
Okay, thank you.
Have any other questions?
Mr. President.
Director Gosa?
Claudia, as far as, I know you said right now we're looking at a negative unspent balance and we're hoping that balance is out. Do you know how much money have we saved on not having to get substitutes and stuff for the past, few months while we've been doing this? Is that quite a bit of savings? I'm kind of along the lines of Director Klein-Jerome about I'm not feeling too hot about having a negative unspent balance when we did all this stuff and we were assured that we would be positive, and now you guys are just kind of guessing that we are. I guess I'm not feeling too comfortable with that right now, especially after the SBRC forgave a lot of that money, and then if we come in with a negative unspent balance, that's not good at all. Not good.
Claudia,
I agree.
Claudia, could I just jump in just quickly,
Sure.
just to clarify that piece? So we're not guessing here. We presented a budget to the school board last year that had a negative unspent balance. We did not know going into this school year that we were going to get relief from the SBRC. And when we did get the relief from the SBRC, at that moment, we didn't know that we were required to have a positive unspent balance for this fiscal year. That was news that came to us when, fortunately, they granted us the $9 million reprieve. But there was never an expectation that we were going to be positive this year based on our projections, knowing that at the beginning of the year, we had a $13 million mountain to climb. Now, we've certainly managed that, and all the budget cuts that the board has approved and all the budgetary restrictions that were forwarded to the SBRC, those were all put in place. But once the school year starts, we don't have the ability to make significant changes in staffing, knowing that over 80% of our budget is consumed by staffing. So we're we're adhering to all of the budgetary decisions that the board made when they approved the budget last year. We're just operating under a different framework when the SBRC said back in January that now you have to be positive this year. So we were hoping that we didn't have to use the insurance holiday, but we had planned for it. It was in our SBRC documents that we put forward. So we're managing the budget the way we said we were going to manage the budget, but the reality of it is that budget is going to be pretty darn accurate compared to what was actually put forward by the board last year. Did I say that accurately, Claudia? I mean, the budget was what the budget was.
Yes, that's correct. And I think we really are on track to be ending the year with a positive spending authority balance. And Dan, to answer your question, I haven't looked at the difference in the substitute teacher cost. I was going to look at that here soon, knowing that toward the end of the year, we typically have some increase in that. And sometimes there's just a lag in some of that information getting turned in to be processed by payroll. So to get a more accurate picture of that, I was going to wait a little bit to look at that, but I certainly will pull together that information and I can send that on to you regarding the sub costs.
Thank you, Claudia. One last question. So if we use the insurance holiday, is that going to be an insurance increase next year as well? Because we use that. I think we get like, what is it, $1.2 million or something from doing that insurance holiday. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And this would be the very last insurance holiday that we can take based on the actuarial review that was done a couple of years ago. We had the option of taking it in next fiscal year or taking it this fiscal year. And regardless of the timing of that, it's the last insurance holiday that we'll take. And no, it won't impact the insurance rates for next year. Those have already been determined.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Claudia, when you send us the information about the savings from the substitutes, could you also look at, I would think our utility bills would be down since the buildings have been closed for 2.5 months. What's the savings versus what we paid last year in utilities versus this year in that same time period?
Sure, I'll look at that also for you.
Thank you. Hey, Bob, this is a question under your general update. You said JB is going to, the ASC, sorry, is opening up. Is that also the tenants are going to be allowed back in the building or just Davenport District?
So the answer to the question is both. So we're going to start obviously with our employees, but our tenants will also be allowed a phased in re-entry into the building.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions?
I have one other question, and it made me think of it. How much of a savings are we going to have from the bus routes because we haven't been using busing and everything like that? That should be a savings too, correct? Or are we locked in to a set amount with them for signing a contract or something?
I'm currently working on that with our legal counsel and with Durham Busing. We are locked into a certain amount because of their fixed overhead costs and that type of thing. But we're working on that. There will be some savings to that, but I don't have that amount yet. I hope to have that soon, by the beginning of next week.
Okay. You're saying there's a locked in for their overhead, so even though we haven't utilized their I'm going to say managerial skills, because that's pretty much what we pay them to do, we're still going to be paying them for that. Is that correct? Is
yes,
that what
for a portion of that, yes.
Okay. And when is that contract with them up?
I would have to check on that. I know we extended that, I believe it was last year, and I don't remember the term, if that was for another 2 years.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bob, I have a quick question for you regarding the phase-in of the tenants. Is there an anticipated time about how long what time frame are you looking at? If we go back June 1st, then when are you expecting to have that phase completed when they're back?
The ASC phase-in team is meeting tomorrow, Linda, and we're going to work on a timeline for that. But the idea is in the next couple of weeks to have a protocol in place where they can come in a safe and responsible manner from a social distancing perspective. And I would expect to be able to have that information in their hands by the early next week.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Director Postian?
Yeah, just echoing what Dan was saying too, on our unspent balance, having a negative balance. My feeling is we need to do everything in our power to get that down to zero. I think it sends the wrong message. I understand, we had a set budget and 80% of the salaries, or 80% of our budget is salaries, but again, some of the things that were brought up on some of the savings we had because of buildings being closed and that sort of thing. But from my standpoint, I'll be very unhappy if that is not a zero or a small positive balance.
I think we're all on that same page. Any additional questions for Claudia?
Mr. President, I have a question for the superintendent on his report. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
Dr. Kubilski, my question is, I don't remember hearing you touch on it, but as far as the graduations and then us lowering the credits or whatever, I'm sure other board members have gotten emails from parents as well about some students being told they're going to graduate and then getting pulled away. I didn't hear you talk about that, so I just kind of wanted to, or are you going to be updating us on that later, or should I make a request for it, or how would you like me to go about that?
I was planning on doing that later. I'd be happy to do it right now.
Oh, okay.
I'll just get it on the table. First of all, this is an apology. We were given the ability by the state to adjust our graduation requirements for students who were on track for graduation, being allowed some absolvance of the 26 credits that were required by the district, and the board voted and approved to take that down to 20. The key feature for that was that students had to be on track for graduation. And unfortunately, some phone calls went out to families for students who were no longer in the school district. They had essentially dropped out of the school district, and a couple phone calls were made from individuals representing the district, inviting these people to drop back into the school district. That is not something that the state would allow. Students actually had to be on track in the system, working their way through up through 20 credits where we could work them through that process. And unfortunately, those calls should not have been made. And I apologize to the families for that confusion. But unfortunately, the state would not allow us to have students drop back into the school system and take advantage of the lower 20 credit thresholds. Now that it's just available for the class of 2020. It's available only for the students that, had they continued their second semester of coursework, would have made it to 26 credits. So again, my apologies on behalf of the district to those, I believe it was less than 10 families. I think it was 8 families that actually received those phone calls inviting them to drop in. That was done erroneously. And I apologize profusely to those families that received that phone call. So, Mr. Gosa, thank you for reminding me of that. We'll get that on sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Just along those same lines, with students that were not quite where they needed to be at the end of first semester, are we making some type of provisions for them to catch up and still graduate on time?
So the board may recall that we identified approximately 65 students that were in need of remediation. We did get permission from the state because those students were actually in school and had an opportunity to catch up, so to speak. And I did receive a report from the high school principals that 27 of those 65 have already caught up and that the others are still in the process. I don't have the final numbers as to how many have made it, but 27 so far have caught up to the 20 credit threshold of those original 65. And there's still more time for the others to continue on that pathway. So that's the most recent update for today.
Okay, do you know what the time frame is on that? Will it be prior to summer school or during summer school or?
Our practice is also, our practice has been to allow those students to attend summer school, and at the end of summer school, if they attend those credits. So it takes them beyond June 6th, Director Hayes, so they can work through it in the weeks beyond that.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I have one quick question. With the families that were erroneously told that their kids could graduate, did somebody make a personal phone call to apologize to them?
No, I just became aware of that. So tonight I'm making a general apology. And I will make a personal phone call to each of the families once they've been identified and those names have been forwarded to me.
Okay, thank you so much.
Other questions? We'll move to items requiring action. 6.01, open enrollment denial appeal. May I have a motion?
Mr. President.
Is that Director Klein-Jerome?
Director Beck.
Okay, Director Beck.
I move that the board follow the administration recommendation to uphold the superintendent's decision to deny open enrollment to the student indicated below, John Powell.
Is there a second?
Second.
Director Hayes seconds. Any discussion? We'll move to the vote. Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Hayes?
I'm going to say no, and the only reason no is because the student has not attended the district in the past.
Director Gosa?
Yes.
Director Postian?
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome?
Yes.
Director Mayfield?
Yes.
And my vote is yes, the motion carries. May I have a motion on 6.02, approval of bid for Phase 2 Central High LED lighting project?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes?
I move the board approve the lowest responsive bid from Davenport Electric Contracting in the amount of $237,150 for the Central High School Phase 2 LED lighting project.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Director Gosa?
That is correct.
All right. Discussion?
Bruce, my only comment in the award letter, there is a comment that says the recommended award of bid for the Achievement Service Center tuck pointing project is to TNT Tuck Pointing and Restoration, Stockton, Iowa, which has nothing to do with the LED lighting. So I guess in the future, I'd like them to look over what they were submitting to us.
I think that's a comment well taken. Any discussion on the motion? We'll go to the vote. Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Gosa?
Yes.
Director Mayfield?
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Postian?
Yes.
And my vote is yes, the motion carries. Item 6.03, approval of policy.
Mr. President, may I make a motion? I would like to move that the board approve policy 904.01 on elections. The date was still listing September when it should be November.
Is there a second?
Second. Sorry, kept knocking it off.
seconded by Director Klein-Jerome. Is there any discussion? We'll move to the vote. Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Mayfield,
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome,
Yes.
Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Postian,
Yes.
and my vote is yes, the motion carries. We're on discussion items, current school year feedback.
So, Mr. President, at the last board meeting, there was a request to hear from teachers with regard to how the last 8+ weeks have gone since we've had to go to a continuous learning platform. As you know, this came out rather quickly right after spring break. We had to identify a learning management system that our teachers could use effectively. We had to train our teachers in using that system, knowing there was a wide variance in capacity to use a system like that. And one of the things that we did very early on in the process was try to make sure that we had a level of expectations for what each week was going to look like for teachers, so that they knew what was expected of them from an instructional delivery model, knowing that it was going to look completely different. But then at the same time, making sure that those expectations were task manageable from an educator perspective, and knowing that there was a lot of heavy lifting. A lot of that work was done by everybody, but certainly the curriculum instruction department took the lead in framing that work. And I've asked Director Corey Guy to join us this evening so she can give us a bit of an overview of the teacher expectations team, the work that they did, how they organized their work, how they received feedback, and then we're able to make sure that we rolled out an instructional design model that was able to attend to as much learning as possible, given the voluntary platform or model that we agreed to, but then, like I said, make it task manageable for the teachers. So Corey, if you wouldn't mind just describing the work of your expectations team, the composition of your team and how broad-based that was, the work they did, and I think you do have a couple representatives on that team who are teachers who would be happy to answer any questions that the board has with regard to anything that's happened over the last 8+ weeks. So Corey, thank you.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. As Dr. Kubilski said, he tasked us with putting a group together so we could get really good feedback from our teachers on this insurmountable task that they had in this new continuous learning plan. They did an awesome job. We had our team met weekly starting in early April, and it was a composition of 16 teachers. And the 16 teachers made up elementary teachers, middle school teachers, and high school teachers, as well as special education teachers. And we had representatives of all of our principal levels. And that team worked every week on Thursday to look at the current expectations for asynchronistic videos, for how do we meet with our students in a synchronistic way where we're doing some live feedback for our lessons. So we early on realized that we really needed to get even a broader scope of what the need was. So we put together a survey, and the survey was developed with that 16-member team and was given to all of our teachers, and we had a great response from that distance learning survey. I think it was almost 80% of all of our teachers took it, which is wonderful. And the feedback from that team that we got from teachers was everything from, do you have a device, a reliable device at home to use, to your Wi-Fi issue, any kind of accessibility issues, all the way to also talking about what kind of needs do they have as far as best practices for pedagogy and designing online learning. And so today we have Debbie Potts, who was part of that team, and Maggie Reitz on the line. Debbie is a third grade teacher at Washington Elementary, and Maggie Reitz is a language arts teacher at West High School. Both of them were members of our team that met weekly, and they also provided that continuous learning to the students that they taught. So they are here. I'm going to make sure that they have connection. So Debbie, can you?
I'm here.
All right, awesome. And Maggie?
I am here.
Great. So now we're just going to open it up to a kind of a Q&A session for the board. So if you have a question, a specific question for Maggie or Debbie, please ask that.
This is Director Beck. I have a couple questions. So I teach college and was forced to go online as well. Now I already taught some online courses, so it wasn't as much of a shock to me, but it was hard to teach online to students who weren't expecting it, especially courses that aren't designed to be online. So I guess my first question to you was, what was the biggest challenge that you found, and each of you can answer in turn if you want, to delivering instruction online, and how do you think we can overcome that?
I think it really just varied by teacher. I mean, I felt like I was experienced enough, at least with the Google Classroom, and that transition for a lot of teachers was managing a new system. And I already do that in my classroom. A lot of the high school teachers do, but that was something I was comfortable with. I think the biggest challenge was really for me as a high school teacher. I teach a lot of one-term classes. I teach speech. So the one-term classes ended just after spring break, and then we were supposed to start new classes. So I think really the struggle was trying to make that transition from ending one class and then maybe starting a new class. But in terms of getting things set up online, I felt comfortable with that. But I know a lot of my colleagues are still trying to get used to the idea of getting videos online, and people might have familiarity with Google Classroom but have never recorded themselves or have never done anything with Flipgrid or Screencastify or WeVideo or YouTube, all of these different pieces of technology that they were using to put this whole thing together. Google Classroom was where we ended up putting everything, but it really was a learning curve for a lot of people to even familiarize themselves with that, all kinds of different pieces of technology that they're using. So I think that was clear in the survey too, that the teachers responded to, is that they do want to continue getting some professional development on all of those things, because I've seen a lot of really great things. My kids are also in elementary school and kindergarten and third grade, so I've seen what elementary teachers are doing too, and people are putting together really great things, but they're learning as they go, and I think that's something that people are looking for, is more things that we can learn as we continue this, especially if we have to do it in the fall.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, there has been a wide variety of where we are at with technology piece of it. I already have my students in a Google Classroom from the beginning of the school year, so it was something that they were used to. The biggest challenge, I guess, was meeting the needs of the parents. We have a lot of our students' parents are essential workers. So what my cohort and I did was we ended up making our very first Google Meets for parents. And we did one during the day and we did one at night to hit both demographics of our working parents. And because, a lot of the times the kids will sit there and say, oh, this is what we have to do, that's what we have to do. But we wanted the parents to be on the same page also, so they knew how to run it and how it worked. And that really seemed to help. And I think bring some stress levels down for some parents when they are working all day or they're trying to sleep during the day. But you have teachers that weren't as tech savvy, and it's pretty amazing how they are stepping up. And now it's like, what next? They want to keep doing it. And the other piece to that is we actually have the time right now to play with it, learn it, and make the mistakes, but yet fix it. And it's only making things better for these kids when it does come to virtual learning.
So I guess my follow-up to that is, so as a teacher personally, I don't feel like online instruction can ever replace face-to-face instruction, although I do know that there are students who do much better in an online setting, but that's a small minority, I feel like. So how do you guys see using technology when we do return to face-to-face learning? Like, what are you going to take from this experience? Or what do you think a lot of the teachers are going to take from this experience as they move back to face-to-face teaching?
I think there's some, really creative tools out there that some people have already brought up, that maybe when they have a substitute teacher, they can put together a video for their students and put it onto a Google Classroom so that they could go watch, a 10-minute video of their actual teacher and then work on something with the sub so that they actually have that experience still with their own teacher. Obviously, with the Google Classroom, I think a lot more people are comfortable with it now, so that would be something that they certainly could continue on and use that as a platform to turn in work and grade work that way. And that varies by grade level, but I think that more people are certainly comfortable with that aspect of it now.
Yeah, and I just know at the elementary level, what we've been talking about is, making sure we are establishing that Google Classroom at the beginning of the year. And maybe, like when we are working in our small groups, the kids are used to being in their Google Classroom to do their must do, may do, lists and things. And just so that it just becomes their way of learning, whether in classroom or out. So.
Thank you very much.
What is your sense of participation? This is Karen Klein-Jerome. Your sense of participation rate in daily activities? Teachers I've talked to are talking 6 out of 30, which is quite low. Are you seeing the same kind of thing? Are you hearing that from your colleagues as well?
Go ahead, Maggie.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it really does vary by grade level and also the course structure, because I teach 9-week classes. So in the beginning, I had some students join and we're doing some of the things in the beginning of my speech classes because we hadn't quite ended that term. And then when students found out, well, we're not really starting term 4, but here's stuff that you can do, the participation rate went down in that. But in courses where it was a continued class, like English 1 or English 2, it's a semester long, there's more participation in those classes because they know that they're continuing on with something that they had already started. And then I know I've heard from people that have, AP classes, they still were taking the AP tests and did all of that. So it really just varied by grade level and whether the course was only 1 term or 2 terms. And yeah, it definitely has dropped off towards the end of the year here. It's definitely a struggle. I think that's true of regular school year too. People kind of are a little over it at that point. And just speaking as a parent, I know that's hard for my kindergartner too, that it's definitely been a struggle these last week or two because he's just kind of over it.
So kind of seeing the same thing, kind of doing a little bit more of a drop off. What we do see, we do have our few that are getting into that classroom. However, our Lexia progress and our ST Math progress, we're still seeing that rise and a lot of kids logging on to that, getting their percentage. There are a lot of teachers I know of and that we send out weekly goals for the kids to achieve by a Friday. And I think when we send those out, parents kind of also know what exactly is expected of them. Our Google Meets seem to be a lot more participation happening there. Like I do 2 a week and I usually get about 8 to 9 kids. Now it depends on who. Sometimes they're the same kids always, sometimes they're different. But I do know a lot of people are getting good attendance, at least in the elementary with their Google Meets, because the kids want to see their teachers and they want to just either talk, say hi. It does become a kind of a show, I guess. You have to entertain and you have to keep them involved and keep them, focused on what we're doing. And it's funny because you can do a 45-minute to an hour Google Meets or even a half an hour, depending on what you're doing. You're pretty much exhausted afterwards because just to keep them going with it. But they keep coming back. They keep wanting to see us and talk to us. And that's an elementary piece of it, though. High school, not too sure. But yeah, and in my eyes also, when they're on that Lexia and that Google Meets, that's a lot of, an Alexia and the ST Math, they're hitting their grade level expectations, and a lot of the, they just kind of really piggyback off of what our standards are at that grade level. So when I'm seeing them logging into that and meeting their goals and, sending out the praise over my Class Dojo to them, like, I'm really happy that they're still engaged with all of that.
This is Director Beck. Can I ask a quick clarification on that? So you're saying you've had a number of students at the elementary level who are doing the Lexia and ST Math, but not joining the Google Meets classrooms and doing that material. Is that correct?
They will also, it's almost like they're putting all their eggs in the basket. Some of them are of doing the ST Math and the Lexia, and then they're using kind of Classroom as the resource for them. But you do see them getting in, and like during the Google Meets, some of the teachers have started to highlight part of the classroom. So when they're wrapping up their Google Meets, they'll present their screen and start showing them something fun and exciting that's in the Google Classroom to try to get more kids to dive into it.
Thank you.
Debbie?
How do we reach out?
Oh, is that Linda? Go ahead, Linda.
No, I was just asking, how do we reach out to students with IEPs?
I know for my class, we have a speech class, we have a co-teacher, and so the co-teacher has been on the CTT with us, and we've planned lessons based around that too. So it's been the case for the CTTs that the special education teachers have been part of that, and I think really it's the case for a lot of the kids is that they are struggling just with other things. I did have a kid that joined just to talk. He was in my class last term, and he was just expressing the idea, yeah, I'm not really gonna do work if it's not required, but also it shouldn't be required because we just have a lot of other stuff going on, because they are high school kids. A lot of them are working, and so I think that was a struggle for a lot of students, that they're just trying to get through everything that's happening. So I don't know that it's necessarily anything by a particular level that might make a difference in how we reach them at this point. It might be different at the beginning of next year because it is the start of the year, and we can try things a little bit differently in that way.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you for that.
Debbie?
Yes, Mr. President.
Well, Mrs. Daughter-in-Law, would you share a little bit with everybody the comments you shared with me about how you had your office hours and the interactions you had with parents and how that developed over the course of time?
Sure. So when I heard office hours, my mind just went straight to how office hours worked in college. Your professors have these hours that you can contact them to answer a quick question or just to clarify something. And then in my mind, my Google Meets was just like my mini session with my students. So I pushed out to parents that I kind of made it around like lunchtime hours. So if they just needed to shoot me a quick text message during that time saying, hey, so-and-so struggling with something, can we meet at a different time? So it was almost like just that touch point for them to, I can get on with them right away. At that point in time, I was going to get to them immediately, or that's our opportunity to set up a different time. So I actually had quite a few Google Meets, like 7:30 at night, 8 o'clock at night, because the parents do work until 5:30. And then by the time they get their kids fed and everything, then I was getting on and helping them with ST Math or with Lexia or how to work the classroom. But I feel like I have a pretty good relationship with a lot of my parents most of the time, but them knowing that I'm there for them and at any point in time that I can get with them, it's almost like the relationship between the parents and me has gotten so much stronger. There's even one time the mom, she was like, okay, and had the kid go away, and her and I just sat and talked for like 15 minutes. It was almost just, it's brought a whole different relationship piece with the parents. Did I answer that, Bruce?
You did well.
Well, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Director Postian.
Yeah, is there anything as a board or as a school district that you feel we should have done differently to onboard the voluntary program?
I think that's tough, sort of acting in the world of what ifs. I think for a lot of high school teachers, one of the challenges was because we already had Google Classrooms that we had to create new ones. That would be something that I, would have liked to see a little bit differently, but I understand why, because there was a lot of teachers that weren't using Google Classroom, and then having a team working together would be easier on that side. And then I feel like teachers maybe would have had a easier time connecting with some of the students, but I don't know, because I was still putting things on my other classroom page to say, hey, join us here, and I was emailing and doing all of that. So I think really it was just a matter of the fact that we are in a tough situation. So it's hard to say if we would have done something different, if there would have been more participation. I just think that it's just tough all around for a lot of people.
So would you say the most disappointing thing of the whole process is the participation?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, at some point, especially as this has gone on longer, it's disappointing to see that people aren't participating, but it's hard for the kids. This is not their way of doing things, and, a lot of the kids are even at home by themselves because their parents are working, and so finding that motivation for themselves to independently get on would be hard. And certainly I'd like to see a lot more kids participate, but it's definitely a different environment than being in the classroom, because we can be there and try to encourage them to get work done and explain things, a second time. And I think it just is, it's just a difficult time. So a lot of the kids, I think, just once they realize that they're going to be okay coming back next year and getting the learning that they need, I think that they were okay with that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. President,
Director Gosa.
First, I would just like to thank you both for being on this meeting and taking the time out of your evening to share with us some of this. From a personal standpoint, I like this a little better because we can actually hear from the people that are doing this stuff. My question, I'm going to kind of follow along what Director Postian was going with, but my question is, what could we do as a board in a district to better help you with this process going forward if we do have to do it in the fall and stuff? I mean, I don't know if you guys are going to have like a debrief on things that we can do to improve, but obviously you probably came up with some thoughts and stuff like that. So from a board perspective, what is it that we could do to help to either like get you the things you need, or I guess you kind of understand where I'm going with my question?
Sure. One of the things that came out of that survey was that there was a number of teachers who said that they didn't have the Wi-Fi capabilities to do, videos effectively, because that takes a lot more streaming. And there were a number of teachers who had Chromebooks that are district issued Chromebooks that maybe a microphone wasn't working correctly, or a video, or it just was slow. So I think that would be something that if we can make sure that we provide some new Chromebooks, not necessarily new purchase, but if we've got some at the schools that are newer than some of the Chromebooks that the teachers are given, that would be, I think, the number one step to make sure that teachers have the access that they need so that they can create. Because if we are in this in the fall, then obviously people are going to be thinking about starting a school year, which is definitely different than ending it, I think. So having that Wi-Fi capability, computer access is definitely key. Another thing that I've heard teachers talk about is simply the access to textbooks. A lot of our textbooks are not new, so they're not online, and even some of the ones that we do have that are newer don't necessarily have the online learning attached to it, or maybe our subscription has gone away for that. But it's, if we can get money in the budget for textbooks, that certainly would be a option, that textbooks that are also online.
Same here. There's a lot of our district Chromebooks that are handed to teachers. There might be keys missing, or one key won't work. So some of the things when teachers are trying to type stuff out, they're like, my E won't work, so can you go in and add that? And just those updated things, so we do have the proper, faster technology piece.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your input. One other question I have, what are your thoughts or ideas on how we could reach out to engage like the students with IEPs and stuff like that? Do you have any thoughts on that? Have you ran across that issue?
I do know that like our special ed teachers at the elementary, they are jumping in on our Google Meet so they can see the kids. I do know they have been in contact like with parents using the Google Voice piece, just to kind of make sure parents, if they have any questions or anything, keeping close talk with parents on that, and encouraging parents to get into our Google Meets with the kids or the Google Classroom. And just, they've been really good support for us general ed teachers, at least at my building they really have been, and making that communication open with the gen ed and the IEP students' parents and things.
Okay, thank you. I do agree with what both of you have said. I have a first grader, a seventh grader, and a ninth grader, so I'm in all the levels, right? My first grader loves LexisNexis and getting on all that, like jumps at doing it, speeding through it. And my high schooler could probably care less. My intermediate, she's kind of about it, but not as excited as my elementary. So I guess it's just younger, and they love doing that. But I do greatly appreciate both of your times for this. I appreciate Corey getting you guys, to help with this presentation to the board. So it's a nice discussion for us to have. Again, like I said, because you guys are right there doing it. So I do greatly appreciate you being adaptive to the times. And I do welcome any feedback that you have or anyone else has as to how we could improve going forward, possibly for the fall, or if we have students whose parents are worried about bringing them back to school right away because of, let's face it, in this day and age, some grandparents are raising their grandkids and stuff like that. I know I would have never got to school if it wasn't for my grandma. She took all of us grandkids to school all the time and stuff. So I know we're going to run into issues like that and stuff. So I do appreciate all your feedback, and hopefully we can get you guys some better equipment or something. We'll have to look into that. But thank you very much.
Thanks.
This is Director Beck again. I just have a follow-up to one of those questions. So you mentioned the textbooks that didn't have online components. Are there any open educational resources for your levels? I know at the college level, we're beginning to explore those. So they're online and they're available to everyone, and they typically don't cost any money, or that you can get a print for very, very little. Sometimes there's also direct digital access, which is a digital version of a textbook, but you can get print upgrades through a publisher. And I know that research shows that people read more comprehensively on paper anyway, so I wouldn't want to replace textbooks. But have you guys been able to explore any of that? Is that even an option for us in the future? Any of those online open resources?
Director Beck, can I answer that one for you?
Sure.
All right. So at the high school level, we do have Edgenuity, which is an online learning platform, and it has access to electronic, copies of materials for our courses. We also look at the open ed resources. So an example of that is our ELA in 5th grade and through middle school. So as we come up for a curriculum adoption, we're always first looking at open ed resources. There are still holes in open ed resources for certain content areas. And all of the new textbooks, publishers have become very savvy on knowing that you need a subscription for the electronic version. And then that subscription goes up in whatever the contract is. So it's definitely a part of our curriculum review. There is still, as you said, there's still a need for textbooks in many of our courses. That everything can't be all online, right? Having that book in front of you is also important. Did that answer your question for OER?
Yes, it did. And I guess my last follow-up to kind of what Director Gosa was asking about to the teachers, what do you think we can do as a board to promote more engagement of the students? Because even if it's required, I know we're still going to have to reach all of those families. So, whether it's access to technology or just a personal call, or do you guys have some ideas there for how we as a board can help support getting everyone involved?
I think, we did a lot of reach out to parents. At least I know personally that, sending things through Infinite Campus, and people made phone calls and sending personal emails, and even people that were on like Remind and sending messages that way. So it feels like we contacted a lot of times, and that was happening. I'm not sure what the right answer is for that. I do think personal phone calls are effective, but I know that even just in my time in regular circumstances, if I try to call a parent, it's almost always a voicemail, and oftentimes I don't get any sort of response. So it's just a matter of, I guess, if we had more people available to make those calls, and I know that was something that was happening, that maybe secretaries and security or whoever was making those calls to try to get more people, at least making sure parents knew that was available for their students. And I think that's just something that just has to continue, but I do think everybody was trying.
Yeah, it became a fine line because, we were reaching out so much, like through our Class Dojo, and then we got that Google Voice, and we were making the phone calls, and then, and like we said, like the special ed teachers were reaching out to their group. Then you had, like our principal and our SAM manager were also reaching out to parents of if we weren't, hearing back from them. And you come to that fine line of, okay, when are we pushing too much, and we don't want to completely push them away and like make them just shut down completely. So, it's a learning curve, and that was one of the big things with us. When is too much? Like how many non-responses do we go for before? Because we were talking. I'm still like with my Class Dojo sending it out, and there's still some parents that just don't respond, but I'm going to constantly keep sending it. And with Class Dojo, I can see if they've read it or not. So I can see they've read it, but.
I guess I just worry that even if it's required, it's going to be harder to reach some of those students without access, or whose parents just don't respond. And did you guys find that you had a lot of students who didn't have the technology to access, or was that not a huge issue for you guys?
I guess I should just speak for the 3rd grade at Washington. I think out of our 34 students, I want to say only maybe 4 of them did not have technology, for them. So.
And I didn't really hear much from my students. I mean, obviously the high school kids already had Chromebooks checked out to them. Whether they had Wi-Fi access at home, of course, is another story. But there wasn't really anybody that reached out that said, you know, I don't have this, but that I don't know how they would. So it's kind of hard to say, and especially because so many kids didn't join into the new Google Classroom because that class technically had ended for them. So that's where it's a little tricky on my side, is because I just ended a class and didn't meet new kids. So it's tricky on that side.
Maggie and Debbie, you both are on the expectations team, is that correct?
Yes.
Correct. Then Corey, this is kudos to you for actually having classroom teachers on this and not people who are not in the classroom telling them all what to do. I think that is great. And thank you, ladies, also for joining us.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
Thanks, Maggie. Thank you, Debbie.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So can I jump into our next topic? So the obvious question is, well, what's next? We're finishing up this school year. It's ending in a couple weeks, and we're fully engaged in the planning and the preparation for the next school year. We know that there's unfinished learning from this quarter that we have to make up next year, and we also know that we have to accelerate the learning that was designed to take place next year also. The state of Iowa has asked us to put together a return to learn plan. Every district has to submit one by July 1st. The fundamental question that every district has to answer is, are we going to continue with a continuous learning online platform? Are we going to go back to an on-site brick and mortar schooling environment, or are we going to choose a hybrid environment? The reality of it is, while we have to select one of those, as a school district, we do not have a crystal ball. We don't know what the health circumstances will be come fall, come August 24th. As a result of that, we're planning for all three of those options so that we're ready for that. We are making plans if we go full on site, what that needs to look like, especially from a health and safety perspective, and making sure that we don't get into another health situation when students re-enter the building. We're also taking a look at if we have to continue with our continuous learning model that we're engaged in right now, but again, it would be a required model. Again, learning from our experience over the course of the last 8 weeks, getting additional training over the course of the summer and support for our staff so that if we had to go to a continuous learning platform, we could. So we're preparing for that eventuality. But then health situation may dictate that we go with a hybrid model where perhaps students come to school on Mondays, and then on Tuesdays a different group of students come to school, and then we do that simply because from a social distancing concept, not having so many students concentrated in a building at one time. It's a possibility. We don't know which one of those is going to be dictated or determined by the health circumstances. So those are all possibilities that are being floated out there right now. But we have a team in place that is utilizing the framework. So we've added to the board docs website for the board's perusal as well as for the public the Return to Learn Plan framework that has been issued by the state of Iowa. It includes 7 essential areas that we have to address in our Return to Learn program. We've taken the guidance from the state and have developed our own Return to Learn plan platform that is essentially our website and how we are organizing the work that we have to do. Hopefully, just by looking at the information that was provided by the state, you get a sense of not only the complexity of the work, but the magnitude of the work. As it's being scrolled through right now, all of this work needs to be accomplished in the next 5 weeks. So if we thought the last 8 weeks were busy, the next 5 weeks, vacations are completely out of the question, and we're certainly going to have to find the dollars to pay for the teachers that are going to continue to be engaged in the processes of planning our return to learn plan. So what we thought we would do for you tonight is give you an overview of what we've done so far with our Return to Learn plan, how we've structured it, how it's organized. It's organized, as I mentioned, by those 7 essential areas, and we have a chairpersons for each one of those. They are online with us tonight, and they can talk. I've asked them to give a 60-second executive summary of the work that they have to do. I appreciate Director Klein-Jerome's comment about utilizing teachers and getting them involved in the process. One of the things you'll hear tonight is under each one of these subcommittees or subcategories, not only do we have chairs, but we have subcommittees that have anywhere from 10, 15, 20 people involved. And we put an all call out to our staff to ask for their support as we develop our Return to Learn plan. So I was very pleased with the willingness of our staff, again, to jump in, pitch in, and be a part of this planning process. So Corey, if you could just give a little bit of an overview with regard to, I think our website really gives a nice, clear snapshot of what the state is asking us to do. And then after you give that overview, let's introduce the chairs and give them an opportunity to respond to the board with regard to the work that needs to be done. And then we can certainly take any questions from the board at that time. Thank you.
Wonderful. So the first 2 links that you have in your board docs is just that 4-page overview. The first link talks about those 7 areas, and it also gives that timeline. It's a very tight timeline. We received this material from the state May 8th, which was a Friday, so almost just 2 weeks ago. The second document in the board docs, and then I'll take you into the website, is the 40-page document, which is the support document that goes with each of those subcategories. So you can see that this was recently released. The Department of Ed is also putting together work teams for each of those 7 areas that will provide more guidance, more support for us as we have our plan in place for both continuous learning for next year, on-site, a hybrid model. We are planning for all of it. So we have a leadership team that meets once a week on Tuesdays, the district leadership team, and it's part of how we do business. And in that leadership team, it oversees all of these areas of the Return to Learn plan. So this site was put together just for those work teams to start to wrap their heads around and to plan effectively for all of the actions and the sub-actions that are in that 40-page document. So I'm going to showcase one, which is the leadership. So overview of leadership, it gives you the overview that was in that 40-page document of what the purpose of that team is and what are the actions within there. So you can see that.
Holes in this Roseland Barbershop's window. A reminder of the bloodshed here.
It's so sad. What does I need?
Just one second. Okay. So, and then you have, each one has team tasks. So for this one, you have to review, write the structure. There are 3 required actions in leadership, and each one of those subsections have required actions. Establish a district leadership team, use a continuous improvement process to develop, implement, and develop and support an effective communication plan. Those are the large actions, and then within each of those A, B, and C, there are sub-actions. So the team meets together, we're looking at all of those, and then we're keeping all of our notes in this note catcher document. So what we have on our note is representatives from the district leadership team that are heading a subcommittee for each of those 7 areas. The leadership is done at DLT, but for all of our other areas, there is a chair who's leading that work. And we just met for the first time this week with the goal of having the actions within those actions to be completed by the subgroup, proposed actions by June 15th. The deadline for the Return to Learn plan for the Department of Ed is July 1st. So you can see the tight timeline that we have. So I gave an overview of leadership. I'm going to go back to the website, and we have on the line all of those facilitators of each of those groups. So I'm going to start with infrastructure, and I know that we have Jen Van Fleet and Marianne Corbin, who can talk about the group and the makeup of that group and some of the work.
Good evening. My name is Marianne Corbin, and as Corey said, I co-facilitate with Jen Van Fleet, the infrastructure team. And our team has diversity of voice, including administrators from the elementary, intermediate, and high school level. We have classroom teachers and innovators also from elementary, intermediate, and high school, and a very wide range of content areas, including core classes, the fine arts, and our CTE. And at this time, Jen Van Fleet is going to give you a brief summary of our focus from the first meeting. Okay, good evening, everybody. Just a couple things that came out of our first planning meeting. We have a planning meeting set up for each Tuesday going forward through the end of June to make sure we're diving deeper into the infrastructure actions and sub-actions. From the infrastructure section of the Return to Learn plan, we know that we need to identify the needs across teachers, staff, students, and families. And so throughout the plan, you'll see referenced a resources and needs survey. So this team is going to look at the development and the administration of that survey. And does that happen on a certain frequency? And then also, how do we connect with those stakeholders who aren't interacting with the survey so we can make sure we capture their voices? And then from that information, we want to quickly be able to implement strategic plans and evaluate and measure our effectiveness on a regular basis for professional development for all of our key staff groups. This group also looks at determining district school calendar changes and are looking at those and then looking at what implications you have for things like the grade book or published calendars and communications. They also look at how that works for attendance and promotion and grading and what that looks like both through a face-to-face and an online or hybrid model. This team is also looking at developing and implementing professional development needs based on the feedback from the surveys that we would take, and then also reflecting on the efficacy of that PD. Did we meet our mark? And then communicating those that data and the needs to recalibrate to the district leadership team. And that is a summary of the infrastructure team.
Thank you, Jen. Another subsection is health and safety. And so I know we have TJ Schneckloff, who is facilitating that group.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
You're good.
Good. Okay, so we are charged with ensuring ongoing workplace safety, supporting mitigation strategies, and monitoring the health and safety of teachers, staff, students, and families. Our committee is comprised of 30 people at all levels across all the bargaining units to seek input. In our initial meetings, we felt that this was the best way to handle this would be to break this into subgroups. So we broke ours into 4 subcategories with a kind of an overarching one. We have health, the overall health office, health of our people and families and students. And Gina Ekstrand, the district nurse, is going to oversee that one. We have the safety operations of our operations plan. McKee, who is in charge of security for the district, is going to oversee that. We have this next category: sanitation, deep cleaning, environmental best practices for
is now
this.
Exiting.
That's going to be oversought by our operations department. And then we see this educational component, which is going to need a wide variety of voices to weigh in. And in that department, we have Steve Muehlenhausen representing the elementary schools, Eric Johnson in the middle schools, and Brian Ehlinger in the high schools. And each one of these people will have a committee of a subcommittee that will continue to reach out. Hi, Susan. Will continue to reach out to widen the equity of voice. And so that's how we plan to move forward with the health and safety component of the Return to Learn plan.
Thank you, TJ. The next section is Iowa Academic Standards, and I facilitate this group with Bonnie Acey, and we have representatives teachers, kindergarten teacher, middle school teacher, and high school teachers on this team, as well as principals. We have an elementary principal, Teresa Beshan, Alan Hartley at the middle school, and Mike Orfatelli at the high school. The focus of the Iowa Academic Standards is just that. We're focusing in on what our students need for the beginning of next school year. So our group met today. We're going to try to meet twice a week for an hour. There's a lot of work to be done on here. And our first conversation really focused on assessing the initial student learning needs. So that's the first action. So we spent our time, we read an article that was focused on the opportunity myth, which is we need to ensure rigorous grade level content standards, and we don't want to do too much with prerequisite and all the last year's learning. So we had a wrap
Unknown participant is now
the
exiting.
equity piece of that. So we had great conversation and realized that we really do need to meet probably twice a week from now until June 15th. The next subgroup is social, emotional, behavioral health. And I'm pretty sure we have Marty Schultz and Jake Klipsch who are online to talk about that group.
Yes, thank you. Corey, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? All right. Yes, so I facilitate or co-facilitate this group with Marty Schultz. The area of social, emotional, behavioral health is broken into the social, emotional, behavioral health of our staff and teachers, of our students, and of our families. And so our group met last Friday, and then we're going to be meeting weekly every Friday, in addition to some subcommittee meetings. So we've broken ourselves into subcommittees as well. We also have representation from preschool, elementary, intermediate, and high school, a collection of teachers, in addition to representatives from AEA, principal, and also a person from Bureau of French to provide some additional support and some expertise in mental health. And further, it's broken up into how we first identify the needs for social, emotional, behavioral health in each of those areas, and then how we address those needs. So my subcommittee today met. We were having such a good time. It was about 2.5 hours that we were breaking down some information, and we were really kind of digging into identifying and addressing emotional wellness for staff and the systems of how we're going to identify some of these pieces. And like I said, we discussed some possible actions which we'll continue to revisit as a whole group. And Mr. Schultz met with his group actually today also, and I'll let him kind of break down for a few moments kind of the things that they discussed within his area of addressing it for families.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Jake. Real quickly, I'm not sure if Jake mentioned this, but our subcommittee is broken down further into thinking about the social emotional needs of our teaching staff, of our students, and our parents. So the subgroup that he mentioned that I led today, we had a meeting to focus on our parents' social emotional needs that we anticipate coming back from this. I would second when Jet Van Fleet mentioned that we can guess all we want. It's going to be much more accurate once we have data on that. So I know the state is planning on getting a survey back to us shortly that we're looking forward to having that information. Just to give you a brief overview, I think you've heard a lot of this. Like, we talked a lot about the infrastructure that we'll need just in terms of the communication hierarchy, making sure that if we come back to school on site, that our teachers have a chance to get refresher training on how to identify, signs and symptoms of domestic abuse, domestic violence, neglect, not just from the standpoint of holding parents accountable, but to reach out and help with that. One of my roles right now in the district is as the homeless liaison. We identified over 200 students this year that have experienced homelessness or housing insecurity at some point during the year. We anticipate that will at least double, I would guess, next year. So we are going to have a lot of needs. And of course, all of those play out in the classroom in unique and interesting ways. So another thing that we've talked about is just that when parents are stressed, that adds extra stress to students. And that stress can come out in some of the issues that we see in terms of behavior, things like that. So it's a lot of issues that we're already aware of that are just exacerbated now, and that will be kind of more in the limelight once we return, whatever whatever shape or form that takes.
Thank you, Marty and Jake. All right, and for equity, I know we have Susan Downs with us, who is the facilitator of that group.
Hi, this is Dawn Anderson Rasher, and Susan and I co-lead the Equity Subcommittee. I am the Program Director of Assessments, ESL, and State Reporting, and I'm going to kind of give the update of our committee. The Equity Subcommittee has 24 staff members representing pre-K through 12, including principals, coaches, special ed teachers, ESL teachers, tag teachers, general classroom teachers, and family support liaisons. The goals of the Equity Subcommittee is to ensure that all students have, regardless of the type of instruction, access to a free and appropriate public education, access to the Iowa content standards, and the support needed to progress in their learning. As the committee develops the equity section of the Ready to Learn plan, there are two aspects of equity we need to consider. The first one is equity with respect to specific populations. Specifically, the plan needs to address students with IEPs, ELs, students at risk, and the state has broadly defined students at risk and tag students. We have broken our subcommittee into smaller groups where each of the groups will address each of these specific populations. But the other aspect of equity that we need to consider is equity with respect to the other sections of the Ready to Learn plan, which is leadership, infrastructure, health and safety, Iowa academic standards, and social emotional behavior. As you can see, equity is a part of all of these sections of the plan. So creating an equitable learning opportunities is of the utmost importance to the district's Ready to Learn plan. And we know our subcommittee is up to the challenge. Susan, did I miss anything?
Nope, you hit every point.
Thanks, Dawn. I'm sorry. I did not know you were online. I apologize.
That's okay.
So that gives you a brief overview of all of the components. There's also a data consideration, and while that's not a subgroup, there are data considerations for each part of the plan. So there's data considerations in leadership, infrastructure, and all of those. And so the team looking at those actions and sub-actions also then will look at the data considerations for that particular area.
Thank you, Corey. So for the board's benefit to try and put a loop on everything that you've just heard, this is a great deal of information for you to absorb in a short period of time. I apologize for a 40-page document that you received on Friday, but we received it just a short time before you did also. Hopefully it has not escaped anyone's attention that what we are engaged in right now is we are developing a strategic plan for the next school year. That strategic plan does have these 7 essential components in it, and if our plan, comes to fruition as we anticipate it will be, we want our community to know that this has been a very thoughtful exercise. It has been an exercise of planning that is incorporated, when I say team effort, as you've heard today, there are well over 100 people in the district right now working on this strategic plan. And our goal is our students' success moving forward. Our goal is to make this a resounding success in the sense that not only are our constituents and our stakeholders pleased and proud, but everyone who's been a part of this institution can be proud of the work that we've done. I know I am with the work that I've seen so far. Certainly there's a great deal of heavy lifting to do, and we have to do this all by June 15th, which means we have to get this in front of the board shortly thereafter so that the board can approve it, peruse it, ask all the right questions, so then we can submit it to the state by July 1st. So it's a very truncated timeline, a lot of heavy lifting that has to be done over the course of the next 5 weeks. But I will tell you, the best and brightest minds in the district are on it right now. You've heard from a few of them tonight. I'm so pleased that when we put our all call out to the staff to help with this subcommittee work, that we have over 100 staff members working on it right now as we speak, and I couldn't be more proud of that. So be happy to take any questions from the board. Again, this is our strategic plan moving forward. It's quite a mountain to climb, but we will climb this mountain.
I read the whole 40-page document. I do have a few questions. So I hope when we get our district plan that I don't get it on a Friday and it's 40 pages. I'd like it a little sooner just for my own time planning. The district leadership team also mentions the possibility of a board member on this team. Do we have a board member that is on there?
We put that offer out. I've discussed that with the board president and the board's vice president. We would like to have a member on that team, so we'll work on a board process to identify who that could be.
They also reference student interaction tracker. Do we use that, and could you explain what that is?
So there are numerous things that it refers to in the 40-page document that aren't developed yet. I can speak to the student information tracker. What the goal of that is that it would it would measure engagement. So while we use Google Classroom, we have a way of figuring out how many hits a Google Classroom has. We need to, in our continuous learning plan, develop a system where we know how many students are accessing that if we go to remote learning. And so we would have the capability of doing that. We also are waiting to see what the Department of Ed has as a platform that they may be sharing soon.
Okay. And the last comment about this is it does talk about, like teachers or students who are at high risk and not being able to be there, and how we're going to handle their students. And having taught K through 12, I know when subs are short, elementary teachers typically get stuck, and I will say get stuck, combining classes to cover. I think that's a very unsafe practice. So I hope that we also look at how are we going to deal with a sub shortage, which we always have, especially in the elementary, because in the intermediate and high school, teachers just have to give up their prep period to cover classes, and we don't have that combining of students. So that is something I want to make sure that we address, especially at that level.
Karen, that's an excellent point, and we've actually brought that up at our AEA meeting to see if we can get some relief from the state with regard to the requirements to be a sub in the state of Iowa to make sure that we can fill that void, knowing that, yes, it's been problematic in the past and trying to avoid that same situation in the future. So it's already being discussed, and you bring up a very good point.
Thank you.
This is Allison. I have a couple of questions as well. So number one, I am not seeing the district website that Corey was showing us. Is that something that the board can look at, the one that says the DCSD Return to Learn plan, or not the website, but the one that you were showing on screen? The Google Doc is the one from the state of Iowa that we had access to. But the one that you guys were showing on screen.
So the website is it's a working document. It's a live document where each committee and subcommittee is submitting their conversations, their action steps, and what next pieces. It's not a public document. That's an internal document right now because it's an actual working document that will be used in preparation for the final proposal that we'll put in front of the school board.
Okay, I guess I was just wondering if there was an opportunity for us to take a look at that sort of in preparation. That way we can have an idea of what's in it before we even get it, right? So for a time management, from a time management standpoint. But if it's not feasible, I totally understand.
Keep it in mind that this document is going to evolve. I think it would probably best serve from a board perspective if you get a first draft of what a final document would look like well in advance before you would have to approve a final one. There are a number of pieces that are being worked on by each of the committees and subcommittees that still need to be vetted through the district leadership team. And that's a filtering process. And I'd hate to have you perseverate over some pieces that will not evolve into the final document.
Okay, that makes sense. And then my other question is just clicking on a couple of the websites, the web links for Iowa.gov. They have a Return to Learn page that has a table with a timeline of Return to Learn deliverables. is that for you guys? It's got like how district and school support provided via webinar every Thursday from 1 to 2 p.m. Are they providing webinars for you guys to follow so that you all know what is expected and how to interpret this document?
Yes, so as a matter of fact, that timeline checklist we were able to review today. As a matter of fact, they talked us through that. We've been having webinars with the Department of Education every Thursday at 1 o'clock for administrators to essentially get updates and where things go. So for example, in today's webinar, we spent a great deal of time on the first 3 of those essential areas: leadership, infrastructure, and the Iowa standards. This Thursday, we're going to spend more time on the others. So while I do appreciate that there's a level of frustration of when we present and provide information to the school board, I just would ask for your patience to know that we still don't have all the information from the state. And as we get it, we have to process it as succinctly as we can, incorporate the work, and then report that back to the school board. But we can only operate as quickly as the state operates, and keeping in mind that they have to manage an entire state and we're just managing a district. So I can certainly sympathize with the work that they have to do. But yes, they keep us informed as soon as there's something that we need to do. And they do give us suggestions and guidance. Everything that you see in there they're not required pieces or checklists, but it's guidance of the types of questions we should be asking ourselves and guiding the conversations we should be having in our district, and we're using that guidance.
Okay, and then I guess my last question was when you were mentioning, when I think it was Dawn was talking about equity with respect to specific populations. I guess I just didn't hear when she listed all the people that were on that committee. I didn't hear a mention of special education teachers. I'm going to assume that they are on there because that is an area that, I want to make sure that we get right, is students with IEPs. She mentioned that subgroup, but she didn't mention having special education teachers on that committee. So,
Allison?
Yes, we have them.
Okay, good. Thank you so much.
We also, on that group, there's also ELL teachers and tag teachers.
Right. I did see that part. Okay, I did hear that. Thank you.
I have a question. In this planning, which appears to be Herculean, if we're planning for 3 possibilities, are we developing then, each of these groups developing 3 plans?
The short answer is yes.
Geez Louise. Okay, that's a lot of work.
Well, and unfortunate, like I said, we don't have the crystal ball.
Yeah, I understand that, but that's, and it's got to be done by June 15th.
The June 15th date gives us enough time to get it to the board because it's July 1st is when the assurances have to be to the Department of Ed.
Okay, so and June 1st is
next week.
Next week. And we don't have all the stuff from the Department Ed as to what they say they want in the basket. Is that correct?
We're getting more guidance each and every day.
The Department of Ed has subgroups for each of those 7 areas, and there's a link to the Department of Education website for the subgroup resources. Not all of those resources are populated yet. They should be.
Okay. All right. So basically, the state has expectations without details.
Potentially.
You don't need to respond. We all know that's how they operate.
When you said it's a Herculean task, it is for everyone.
It is. It is. It is. And I commend the teachers and staff members who are giving up hours and hours and hours of their time to accomplish this. I appreciate that very much.
I would add that the department's website is available to the public. So any board member, any citizen, any parent can go there anytime and read these documents are populated. So the ones that we put in board docs have been there for a little while, but anytime you want to take a look at what's the latest information that is, every week the state puts a little something more on there that you can take a look at, and anyone can jump on that website and take a peek.
Anything else from anyone?
Mr. President.
Director Gossett.
First, I want to thank everybody that's a part of these committees and stuff. Obviously, this is going to be a tough task to tackle. I would think if you did two, the online versus brick and mortar, and then you can kind of combine the two for the third one. I could see that for that hybrid. I do appreciate that. My question was, I don't remember if it was mentioned or not, but would we be able to get like a list of the committees and who are on all of the committees and like their title, I guess, so we know who's all, is involved?
Sure, I could get something to Mary that we can get out to you as a board.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure we were covering all our bases. And Dr. K had mentioned, Bruce and I did kind of discuss with him about, getting board members involved on committees, because we have to start taking a stake in things and step up to the plate as well, to help out wherever we can and show everybody we do have a vested interest in this, and we want to be part of the solution. So we did discuss. So I hope more board members are able to get involved and help out with things. I know schedules and everything like that, but being able to do a Zoom meeting or a Skype meeting is pretty easy nowadays. So, but again, I just wanted to thank everyone for their hard work and stuff. And you said the Google Doc, that's not available to us, but they do put like notes in from all their meetings and stuff like that, because that was going to be something I was going to ask, if we were able to see kind of some of the notes and stuff of things that were going on and stuff like that. But if that'll be made available to us at a later time, I mean, I'm fine with that. I just I didn't want it to get to be a point like how we have the past practice. The board always gets stuff at the last minute, and then if we have a question, then all of a sudden we got to whoa, now we got to figure this out, and then do some things different. So I didn't know if we had a little involvement with things that would help out. That way you get the questions that we needed answered right away to us and stuff like that, so it doesn't feel as uphill as it is, I guess. But again, I do appreciate everyone's hard work on this, and it is an uphill battle from here on out. So, and that is all I had.
Well, and Director Gross, I support your thought. One of the reasons we were hoping to get board involvement in this process was to help us with anticipating the questions that we may get from the board. So to your point, so we're not scrambling at the end, with a document trying to provide answers to a question that comes from left field. And if we can get a board member to volunteer for each one of these committees, just to be a part, and we could even have an opportunity for the board members to share with the rest of the board their thoughts and ideas in terms of what they're seeing. So this is all hands on deck, and that includes the school board. And if the board is willing to engage in this process, we would be very appreciative also. I do want to add one little quick piece too, because we're talking about timelines and we talk about the Department of Education, giving us the information, but keep in mind also that there's a governor's office and a legislature that's also involved in these pieces. So that also is information that gets to the Department of Education that they have to wait for also. So there's just so many levels of governance here that it makes the timeline even more difficult to manage. But we're going to do it. We have the teams in place that are doing the work right now, and I have every confidence that this community will be very pleased with the strategic plan that we will have in place to start the next school year.
The legislature comes back June 3rd.
Correct.
Mr. President, I have one final question,
Sure,
I guess.
go
That maybe he's talking. On these committees, I didn't really hear anything mentioned about disproportionality. Are we going to try to tie that in to tackle some of that hurdle with this process as well?
Absolutely. It actually is woven into the fabric of all the committees, but more so the equity committee.
Okay.
That's the work that's been taking place throughout the course of this year, and certainly is a part of our decision-making model moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, would you like to be on that equity committee?
I would be more than happy to, unless Director Hayes would like to.
Okay.
Be.
I'll have Mary send out to the board tomorrow a list of the committees, and then board members can let Mary know which one they wish to choose to serve on, and then she'll communicate that with the chairs of those committees.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you.
Anything else?
I was just going to say I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the hard work that everybody's doing. This is not something easy to do, but I'm confident we can get it done.
Well, and after the presentations this evening, hopefully the board has a good idea of what the work is of each of these committees, so that you're not just randomly picking a committee to serve on the one that you think would best fit your willingness to serve the district. So I think the overview hopefully was helpful to the board, where we can ask which committee you'd like to be on now.
Okay, we'll move on to policies. Director Beck, you want to lead that discussion?
Yes, let me pull up my other page here. Okay. Oh. All right, so we have two policies for discussion. This will be the first reading of each of them. So the first one is part of the budget discussions earlier in the year, involved Dr. Kubilski recommended a minimum class size, particularly at the high school level, to help more efficiently utilize our staff, basically not running classes that were very small and consolidating. So maybe running a class once every other year, every spring, instead of every semester or something like that. And so we also had an elementary class size policy already, 603.01. So I rewrote it so that I could hopefully include minimum class sizes for high school students. And of course, this is sort of a first pass, so I would welcome any comments that anyone has, either on grammar or whether it doesn't make sense or whatever.
Allison, on number 4, where it says 4th, 5th grade, 26 students, shouldn't that now be 4th, 5th, and 6th, since that is the elementary building?
Yes, that is a good point. And that's actually not something that we have discussed. But I would assume that is correct. Dr. K, is there something I'm missing, or is that correct?
I wouldn't assume that that's the case. So we have a team right now that's working on the not only the K through 6 model, but we also have a team that's working on what our junior high model looks like. And I will reach out to Associate Superintendent Scott to see what their recommendation is for class size for 7th and 8th grade, as well as for 6th grade. And if there's any changes, we can bring that forward in the next policy.
Okay, so for now, should I put in 4th through 6th grade and then we'll revisit it? Or do you think that's something that we'll know by the next reading of this policy, the next regular meeting?
Is now exiting.
We'll have an answer by the next
Jake Klipsch
Okay.
is now joining.
So I will just add that in.
Martin
Thank you,
Schultz
Karen.
is now exiting.
Is there anything else? Yeah.
Yes. At the end of that section, when it says the board will receive a report on class size exceptions at the secondary level once per semester, since a lot of classes only run one term, I would like that to say once per term, not semester, because I think we're missing a lot by waiting a whole semester when you've got a lot of classes that are only one term.
Okay, so the idea was that we would get the reports so we would be able to sort of track the financial side of things. And that's why we said once per semester, just to make it not onerous, but we would get it broken down by term. But you feel like it would be better to have it actually every term?
I do, because I think that way you can look and see, first term, we were way under on some of these classes, which obviously costs us, or second term we weren't. I guess I'd like to have a handle on it sooner than a whole semester is gone.
Okay. Does anyone else have any comments on that?
I wouldn't find that onerous.
Okay.
The third thing, and maybe it's just not clear to me, it's the second paragraph.
Clips is now exiting.
Where it says the superintendent and you crossed out directors and put board with the approval of the superintendent. To me, that makes it sound like if the superintendent doesn't approve it, the board can't determine the class size for each school unit. I mean, I'm not getting that approval of superintendent after the fact that it's the superintendent and the board shall determine the class size for each school unit.
Yeah, that's just a holdover from before. So that's why I wanted other people I just changed board because we typically use that instead of directors. But I see what you mean. So it's kind of redundant. So cut out that whole sentence or that whole phrase with the approval of the superintendent, and just the superintendent and the board shall determine the class size for each school unit.
That's my feeling. But maybe there's something I'm missing in this.
Well, and if I could just ask for clarification, maybe this is what you're thinking about, Karen, is when you say the board will determine, is that meant that they will make the determination prior to the school year what a class size is for each school and for every grade level? So for example, we have a maximum recommended class size. What if, for the sake of argument, we have a third grade class that has 23 students instead of 22, but we have a very seasoned teacher in there, and we feel that would be, I wouldn't imagine that the board wants to approve grade level by grade level, school by school class size. I would expect that they would hope to see a report on what those class sizes look like, but I could see it being onerous for the board to approve any change. And, if we go with a third grade class of 23, I couldn't imagine the board wanting to get that involved in the minutia of pulling together class size pieces. Is that?
Well, then maybe that whole the superintendent and the board shall determine the class size for each school unit. Maybe that's not what we're really saying we want to do. I'm
maybe it's the superintendent will. Well, yeah, because a lot of it's based on research as well. But the board has to approve the maximum class size.
But I agree the fact that we have had classes that, like in second grade, have been 22 or 23, and we've let them go. I don't think it's ever come to the board for any kind of determination or, oh yeah, that's okay, or.
Oh yeah, and I don't think we want the board to have to do that, no.
But the second paragraph makes it sound like the board and the superintendent are going to determine the class size for each school unit. I just think that second paragraph, we need to define who's making the decision, and are we just being informed, or how this is playing out.
So maybe that second sentence should say something like the superintendent shall have the responsibility to approve any modifications or exceptions to the class size guidelines. And then we can ask for a report, not just on class size exceptions at the secondary level, but also at the elementary level.
I think Karen's spot on when the term informs the board, whether that's a formal report or something to that effect. We can certainly move in that direction. I think that's a more manageable system.
Okay. I can wordsmith that a little bit. And Karen, if you have some recommended language, can you send that to me?
Sure. I haven't thought about it, but I just know it doesn't sound clear to me with the way it is.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm sitting here trying to add in changes while we're talking, but I'll see if I can't come up with something as well. So basically the idea is that we approve the minimum class sizes at the secondary level, maximum at the elementary level, but it's the superintendent who approves exceptions, and then the board's going to get a report on all of those, correct? That's what we're going for.
That sounds reasonable to me. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
That makes sense to me, but anybody else have any comments on that?
No,
That makes sense to me
that's
as well.
reasonable. That sounds reasonable to me also.
Okay. I will, I'll write something with that in mind then. Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
Why couldn't we just, how you got in red there at the secondary level, the board recommends, why can't it just say at the elementary level, the board recommends a maximum class size of what the number is, but exceptions will be made in unusual circumstances, and put that in the second paragraph?
We can do that. Yep.
And then it does everything you wanted it to do.
Okay. Yeah, we still have to change that second paragraph though with who's approving it. But I see what you mean. Okay, we'll get a report. Got it. All right, I'll put something together. And Dan, if you can shoot me an email or a text with those words that you just said, that would be awesome.
I just took what you had at the very bottom in red, but you had secondary level, and I just added elementary level.
Okay.
Instead of minimum, I said maximum.
Okay. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay. Anybody else?
I'm just going to add quickly that there are new class size numbers that were not embedded in this policy as it's currently written. I'll have to share those with you when we bring them to the board. So the numbers you're seeing right now are not correct.
Oh, okay, good. Well, just send those along and I'll put in the correct ones as well.
Are those numbers in kindergarten through 6th grade that are not correct?
So 4, 5, and 6. So kindergarten is 24, first grade is 24, second grade is 26, third grade is 26, fourth grade is 28, fifth grade is 28, and sixth grade is 29. So those are the numbers that I have.
When did that come into play? Because I feel like we approved minimum increasing the class size by one student. What was it, like 2 years ago, maybe?
I'll do some more research on the timing of that. I just
Okay.
have the numbers in front of me, but I don't have when that was approved by the board.
Oh, yeah, and it doesn't look like, I mean, this was only reviewed in 2015, so maybe the board didn't make a change to the actual written policy. So, okay.
I'll research that for you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anything else on 603.01?
I would have a concern about 29 sixth graders in an elementary building, but that's just my take on it.
Okay. Okay, the next one is a proposed new policy. It was actually brought to us by Corey Guy on virtual meetings, just because we've moved into this world of virtual meetings, and it's just establishing the same expectation for behavior in a virtual meeting as expected in face-to-face meetings. So I would welcome any
Gina
comments.
Ekstrom is now exiting.
All right. No comments. We will keep that one as it is written and bring it for a second reading at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Allison.
Yep.
Now I have some board reports, requests for board reports. This one is from Director Klein Jerome. It's an information request.
Jen Van Fleet
Description of the request is
now exiting.
Are all administrative evaluations complete? Reason you are requesting: the district was cited by the state for failing to complete evaluations on administrators. The board needs to make sure this is taken care of. Is there a second?
Second.
When would you like this information? It says June 2020. Board request, Karen Klein Jerome. Information request: did we get out of the CAA rental contract without paying a penalty? It's important for the board to know the financial impact of moving the CIA to Sudlow. Is there a second?
Second.
And would like the information by early June. Karen Klein Jerome, information request. Do we have a comprehensive school improvement plan? Where can the board members find this? How often is it reviewed? Should we be reviewing this at least quarterly? Reason for the request? This is either an agenda item or an information request. It's important for the board to know the comprehensive school improvement plan is, what is our long-range vision, and whether we are making progress on it. Is there a second?
Second.
By June 2020. Klein Jerome, information request. Exit interviews should be conducted by the district when employees are resigning, and summary of the information given to the board on a monthly basis. Why are you requesting this information or agenda item? This is an information request. We're having high turnover of staff, and the board should be kept informed as to the reasons for this turnover. This goes along with the Iowa Standards for School Leadership Standard 2, monitoring the culture and climate of the district. Is there a second?
Second.
When would you like this information? Quarterly. Klein Jerome, agenda item. On the consent agenda, under resignations, terminations, a reason for leaving the district will be listed, i.e. relocation to another area, other employment in a neighboring district, health, family commitment, RIF, etc. Why are you requesting this information or agenda item? Previously on agendas, reasons for resignations were listed. The board should be informed why employees are leaving the district. Is there a second?
Second.
I thought that was protected information.
It used to always be listed on the agendas.
Okay. Well, I'd add to that request to check with legal to make sure it's not protected information.
I'll make a note of that. This is at the, when would you like this, the June regular board meeting? Yeah, goes. Karen Klein Jerome, item request for information. Wants a board discussion about offering early retirement incentives for 2021 school year. We need this discussion about the continuation of the board offered early retirement incentive payout of the management fund, the merits of it, and whether we are willing to support our employees as they retire. This is second by
Second.
September 2020. Board request, agenda item from Director Gosa. Have a meeting with the special education director to find out where we are with the citations and what we're doing to keep going in the right direction. Feels the board should know the new directions, the new director's game plan going forward.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
This is requested to be at the July Committee of the Whole. Director Gosa, board request and agenda item, disproportionality, have a discussion on what is being done to address this. This is an agenda item for discussion. We have not had any discussion or information on disproportionality, and we need to discuss this regularly to keep it on the front burner. This is there a second?
Second. Second.
The request is for this to be as soon as possible. Director Gosa, agenda item, have a discussion on a strategic plan. I think this dovetails, or this is the same, similar to the one that Director Klein Jerome requested. I feel that after inquiring about the strategic plan, I'd like to lead a discussion so we can get moving on this process. This is for, is there a second?
Second.
And this would be for the next committee, the whole meeting. I think we already discussed that, didn't we? Yeah, that's already on the agenda. Director Gosa, an agenda item, have a discussion on the district's hiring retention process as well as employee development. I feel it's important for the board to know how this process works and what we're doing to improve it. Is there a second?
Second.
As soon as possible. Director Gosa, agenda item. I feel that we need to have a spreadsheet with the board requests listed, including the person making the request, the data the request has been made, and the status of the request. I believe this will help the board members keep track of their board requests. There's not so many.
Second.
That isn't an agenda item. That's a request for information. Is there a second?
Second.
Who was that?
Linda.
Linda.
Okay. This is as soon as possible. Go, sir. Information request. I would like an Excel spreadsheet with the following information broken down into columns for all employees. Name, position, description of job, what pool of money they get paid from, salary. I would also like this broken down by building. I feel this is information the board needs and it should be readily available. Is there a second?
Second.
This is as soon as possible. I have a board request from me. I'd like to get a full report on the plans for providing instrumental music instruction to the 5th and 6th graders next year. This could be an agenda item, or it could be a committee of the whole discussion or presentation. I think it's important because we're making some significant changes in the status of the 6th graders when it comes to instrumental music. And I think it would be important for us to keep tabs on how we're going to do our best to maintain the level of musicality that we've become accustomed to with our students.
Second.
And this could be probably this summer. Okay.
I have a board request that I forgot to send in. Can I don't know.
Go ahead.
Okay, I think it's a board request. I'd like to know when we are going to do the superintendent evaluation, which I believe should have been scheduled a while ago. So I guess that's an information request.
The superintendent's evaluation is scheduled for 90 minutes prior to the June board meeting.
You mean July?
No, June.
June. Oh, sorry, we're still in May. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And you'll be
Then my
receiving,
request is solved.
you'll be receiving other information connected to that, and you'll be receiving the completed evaluation form submitted by the superintendent a week prior to the meeting.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Administrative reports.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, yes. Director Post.
would it be appropriate for me to make a comment on board requests?
Yes.
Okay, there was a lot of requests made tonight, and I don't disagree with a lot of them. But what I do disagree with is the timetable. Again, look at what our administration, teachers are trying to accomplish by June 15th. And we're throwing them with timetables of 1st of June, middle of June. I don't know what you people are thinking about, but it's fine to have the board request, but think a little bit about the timetable. I want the administration focusing on the return to learn. Matter of fact, that's the only thing I want them to be focusing on right now. I don't want to be dabbling in this frivolous stuff. You can put a lot of that back on the back burner. That's all I got to say.
Do we have any administrative reports?
No reports, but I was asked to review one more time for late arrivals to the board meeting from the general public to review the graduation protocol. So we will have KWQC will be doing a virtual online graduation for every high school on June 6th, and look forward to having that process. But also the proms have been canceled. There was a question out there about whether we're still having prom or not, and the answer is no, we are not having a prom. But graduation will be virtual, and it will be on Channel 6 KWQC June 6th.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All right.
Meeting is adjourned.